Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be both a sequel of a previous lesson as well as a prequel. It's going to be a sequel. It's going to take place in Luke's first chapter, and what we did is we took the range of verses 26 through 38 and combined it with Matthew's version of the virgin birth promise, which is Matthew's first chapter, verses 28 through 18 through 25 rather. And the lesson we already did that it's going to be a prequel to is from verses 57 through 80. This is the Song of Zacharias. So the first chapter of Luke consists of four parts. The angel Gabriel promises miraculous births to two people who are related by blood, the first of which is Zacharias. He's a priest serving in the temple, and him and his wife Elizabeth are past the childbearing age, and they've been praying long and hard, and this angel shows up to him in his once-in-a-lifetime temple duty to light incense before the altar. And who emerges but Gabriel, one of the two angels that are known by name, the other being Michael, the archangel, and he reveals the promise of a miraculous birth. But what happens is Zachariah doubts it, and Mary has a more faithful response. She questions it, but she doesn't quite doubt it out loud, and because he doubted out loud, he is imposed this silence. And then the promise comes to him, and because Mary responded faithfully, she has her powers of speech, so she is able to give her song of praise, which is known as the Magnificat, before Zacharias gives his song of praise, because the first thing he does once his power of speech returns, he was inflicted with a spirit of dumbness for doubting for the duration of his wife's pregnancy. So the first thing he does after 9 months of no power of speech is praise Elohim who fulfilled his promise. And the promises of divinity and angels are binding. So he was promised a son in his ripe old age, but he was also promised dumbness. Both of those promises remain inviolate. And the virgin birth account, there's a few things we want to cover. We'll start from the 35th verse just in review. We've already covered much of Luke's chapter extensively. We don't want to waste too much more time in the preamble. Verse 35, and the angel answering said to her, in the context, this angel promises her that she has found fit grace with Elohim, and she will give birth to a son, and he's told his name is Joshua. He's going to be great, son of the Most High, and he's going to inherit the throne of his ancestor David. Both Elizabeth and her fiancé, they wouldn't be married, so she was pregnant by the Ruach Kodesh, as we learn in the 35th verse. And in Matthew's version, we read that Joseph seriously contemplates the act of divorcing her, but he is visited by an angel who assures him otherwise, that she had not fornicated with someone else before they got married. But verse 35, Mary questions, how shall this be, since I do not know a man? No means she's a virgin. To know sexually, Adam knew Eve in Genesis 5th chapter, so that means carnal knowledge. So she knew not a man, she was a virgin, and that is the source of her questioning, but not doubt. Zechariah, equivalent version in verse 18 is, and Zechariah said to the angel, by what shall I know this? For I am old, and my wife advanced in years. And because his is more doubtful, well, Mary responds in faith after verse 35. And the angel answering said to her, the Ruach Kodesh shall come upon you, and the power of the Most High shall overshadow you. And for this reason, the sacred one born of you shall be called the Son of Yahweh. So we witnessed the virgin birth was a process of the Trinity in tandem. Even though it only affected the Son, it was affected by all three members. We read of both the Ruach Kodesh, the Spirit, was the source of her impregnation, and the power of the Most High, that Yahweh, the Father, will overshadow her, and she will give birth to the human manifestation of of divinity in the Trinity. He is pre-existent, but his purpose was to enter into the human experience and accomplish our salvation, because he alone was constitutionally capable of qualifying as our atonement. And you see Elizabeth, your relative, she has also conceived a son in her old age, and this was now the 6th month to her, whom was called barren. So Elizabeth has not received the son yet. She is 6 months pregnant. She's almost there. But when Mary hears this promise, she is compelled to visit her relative. Now, in some versions, she's relative. So she was either a cousin, an aunt, or a sister. We don't know, but we do know that Yahshua and John the Baptist were related by blood. Because with Elohim no matter shall be impossible. That is more than a slogan, that is a statement with truth. We don't want to limit his power by imposing any obstacle in our imaginations of what an omnipotent being can and cannot do. And Mary said, "See the female servant of Yahweh, let it be to me according to your word." And the angel went away from her. So even though she sort of semi-doubts along the lines of Zechariah, she receives the answer and she responds faithfully. Zechariah had already received the promise. That's what makes Mary's more faithful than his thing of doubt. So because Mary is not responded faithfully, she's not imposed this prohibition of silence. She's able to talk, and she received the news. And then the first thing we find in the range we're actually going to cover is that she visits Elizabeth. So verse 39, lesson itself. And Mary arose in those days and went into the hill country with haste to a city of Judah, and entered into the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. So Mary and Joseph were denizens of Galilee, the town of Nazareth. That's where he grew up, but he was born, as we read in the 2nd chapter, the decree of the pagan emperor Caesar Augustus was providentially arranged to fulfill the prophecy and promise of Malachi 5:2. But Judah so this would have been about 80 to 100 miles, about a 4-day journey, because Zechariah is a priest near the temple, so he lives in Judea. That's the region where Jerusalem is, and it's also the region where Yahshua was born. He was from the tribe of Judah. He is the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Revelation 5:5, a descendant of David who also hailed from the son to whom the scepter of power was predicted to by his father Jacob in Genesis 49, verses 8 through 10. And but she not only goes, but she goes with haste. So faith means action. So when you hear the promise of an angel or divinity, you have to make the most of it and not waste any time. So she goes to find this. She's walking by faith. She's going to investigate what she has been promised because she has an ironclad certainty that it is there. And she enters the house of Zechariah. That is her husband. Elizabeth is the mother of John the Baptist. Zechariah is the father. They are a elderly couple, advanced in years, so in all likelihood Elizabeth wasn't Mary's sister. It was probably an aunt. And it came to pass, when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, that the infant leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Ruach Kadesh. So like mother, like son, because John the Baptist is also promised in verse 15, even from he will be filled with the Ruach Kadesh even from his mother's womb. So it is the Ruach Kadesh inside him, indwelling in him, that is prompting him up to leap in his womb, because he's aware, he has the spiritual faculties and revelation of the presence of the one he exists to pave the path and point the way to. And that was his function, and he was born 6 months in advance, so he's aware of the smaller embryo in his female relative. Mary was related to him. They were family. We're not exactly sure how, but he's aware that this embryo at this point, because Mary was literally just promised there, this couldn't have taken place more than 4 days after, so she's maybe 4 days pregnant. Elizabeth is 6 months, so this is a pretty advanced infant in the womb responding, and he is responding, leaping in her womb because he's aware of the presence. And the mother, who is his source of life, as is every infant, is also filled with the Ruach Kadesh. And we read of Simeon. He is described in that term, a man we meet in the 2nd chapter. And called out with a loud voice and said, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." So there's 2 people she pronounces blessings on, the mother and the son, the yet to be born son, because she is filled with the Ruach Kadesh, so she has a premonition that the same angel, perhaps not the same angel, but the same promise had been delivered for a miraculous birth. Now, Elizabeth conceiving in old age is nothing new in the Bible. This is as old as Abram and Sarah, or they may have been, they were Abraham and Sarah by the time they conceived Isaac. And I think Abraham was 100 and his wife was 86, but also the mother of the parents of Samson and the mother Hannah of Samuel. And incidentally, the Magnificat, the song of praise that Mary sings, which forms the bulk of the section we're going to be covering bears many parallels between Hannah's song as recorded in 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter, first 10 verses. We'll get on that more when we get there, but the main word that comes out of her mouth is blessed. So she's aware that Mary will be blessed, and she's bringing into the world a blessing beyond measure. And because the virgin birth is something unique, unprecedented, and unduplicated in human history. "And who am I that the mother of my master should come to me?" So even though this child bears much of the genetic material, because he was fully human, he did carry his mother's genes, and he also bore his divine nature was fully intact with his human. So she's aware that who is, as a mere human, a mere mortal, despite of the blood, who am I to be worthy? First off, I have this baby in my belly that I've been praying for decades, and now the infant incarnate embryonic Messiah is in my present, is visiting, and his mother is coming to me, the mother of my master. So she considers him, she already has the mindset and mentality of disciples. We call the one we follow and mimic master. And he does come to us by God's grace. He does live in our hearts, and we ought to be similarly inclined to pronounce blessings when he does manifest in our lives. And where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, so too is he. The key word is gathered in his name. That means for his purposes and his will. "For look, the sound of your greeting came to my ears. The infant in my womb leaped for joy." So the infant almost has a mind of its own. It is so spiritually saturated that it has a premonition. So this is obviously an intelligent, spiritually in tune infant, and she takes note of the fact that a mother can feel. Pregnant mothers often relate the experience of babies kicking in their belly, but leaping is something altogether unusual and different. So she has the premonition from her promised child, who is also promised to be great but subordinate. He was the first prophet since Malachi in the land of Israel, and but the infant in her is aware of one who is greater than he. "Blessed is she who believed, for that which Yahweh has said to her shall be accomplished." So she's aware at this moment in time that her husband is mute, and he must have communicated to her in writing that he recorded the transaction of the angel's promise to his wife upon leaving the temple, and he was also in there for an unusual amount of time. So the temple attendants, his fellow workers, knew something was up, and it'd been a while since an angel appeared in Israel, and his promise to him was coming true, coming to be fulfilled. She could feel the baby in her belly, And blessed is she who believed, unlike her husband, whose initial response was one of doubt. And she is blessed to speak, and because she has the blessing of the power of speech, she lends her speech to a song of praise. This is known as the Magnificat. This is the first of 4 songs of praise in Luke's 4th chapter. All of the names derive from the Latin translation, even though Latin is not the language of the Hebrew people or that the Bible was written. The translation of the Latin Vulgate, circa 1328 is the year they divided the paragraphs into verses, but there was a version of Latin language, and the opening words in hers is so named and so known as the Magnificat because the first words are Magnificat anime mea donimum, and the Benedictus is the song that Zechariah is compelled to sing as soon as his power of speech is returned. We read of the fulfillment of the promise that was given to Zechariah in the tail end, the section which this lesson is a prequel to. And we read of the fact and the event of the infant birth all the way up to his childhood of 12 in the 2nd chapter. But as we mentioned earlier, this bears many parallels between the songs, the Song of Hannah as recorded in the 2nd chapter of 1 Samuel, first 10 verses, and that what we witness and read is that it reverses the fortunes for the oppressed and outcast, and it brings salvation to the least, last, lowly, and lost. So the unlikeliest of characters. And the 2 songs I should have mentioned earlier from Luke's 2nd chapter, one is just the 14th verse. It's a single verse, but it's sung by a heavenly host. So there's an individual angel who gives the revelation that the infant incarnate Messiah was about to be born, and then he's joined by a host of heavenly angels who sing Gloria and Excelsior Deo from the Latin translation, and also Simeon, the prophet who was possessed by the Ruach Kadesh that I earlier mentioned. He sings a song in 2nd chapter, verse 29-32, known as the Nunc Dimittis. So let's examine the song itself. And so first off, there's a structure. There are 3 people of blessings, the first of which is Mary, the second of which is us, and the final of which is Israel. We'll comment on them in greater detail as we progress. But Mary said, first thing she says is, "My soul makes Yahweh great, and my spirit has rejoiced in Elohim, my Savior, because he looked on the humiliation of his female servant. For look, from now on all generations shall call me blessed. For he who is mighty has done wonders for me. The sacred is his name." So that range, verses 46 through 49, describes the blessings that Mary feels. She considers herself blessed just so blessed that she has no choice but the instinctive compulsion to make Yahweh great. That's what we do not make him great, but we can sing of his greatness. He is unmanipulable by us, but he does delight in our praise. And she considered my Savior. Now we typically refer to the Son as the Savior, but Elohim entails all 3 beings. And in the Old Testament, the passage of a passage of Isaiah, Yahweh declares that he is the Savior and there is none other. And she's aware that, the one who had done this is mighty. It's an omnipotent being. Who else could possibly conceive an infant and a birth through the womb of a virgin, but one whose name is sacred? That means he is sacred. So there's no, strictly speaking, separation between Yahweh, Elohim, or any of their names. The segregation is only apparent. Names have more meaning to the Hebrew people. They indicate a function to be fulfilled, and we are informed earlier that his name is the name is given to both Zacharias and Mary Zachariah's child will be known as John. The Hebrew version of that name, Yohan, translates as Yah's grace, and Yahshua's name translates as Yah's salvation. So Yah's grace leads to Yah's salvation. And then verse 50 through 53 describes the blessings for us. So Mary is not the only one blessed for bearing the blessing of her womb. We too are blessed. And his mercy is from generation to generation to those who fear him. He did mightily with his arm. He scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He brought down rulers from their thrones and exalted the lowly. He has filled the hungry in good, and the rich has sent away empty. So this indicates the reversals of fortunes for the oppressed and outcast, and the divine judgment. A lot of the worldly justice is going to be turned on its head, reversed, and every wrong will be righted. So at that, it's all because of his merciful. Mercy is an attribute that is more than a description or an adjective. If we speak of a merciful human, he possesses a quality which emanates from and belongs to divinity, and his mercy is as everlasting as he is, and it extends to all people of all generations, but only those who fear him. So fear is the key for us to unlock and unleash his mercy. And he doesn't have a literal arm, but he did mightily with his arm. Arm is an anthropomorphism. He is an invisible, intangible, incorporeal, spiritual being without a body. Yet we speak of his arm. He speaks of his arm, his outstretched arm. He doesn't have a, but we approach the unfamiliar from the language of the familiar. We have arms, he doesn't, but he does mightier things with his lack of arm than we can ever hope to do with ours. The proud deserve to be scattered, and you can tell the proud for who they are by what they say, but also the thoughts of their hearts. So pride is a sneaky sin, because a lot of people cultivate an exterior of humility and don't show others their pride, but it does jumping jacks in their own mind. But pride, they will be distributed accordingly. They will be scattered because of the thoughts of their heart. So even men who are virtuous on the exterior but internally viceful will be recognized by Yahweh, who judges the human heart and sees past the surface. Man looks at the flesh, Yahweh judges the heart, 1 Samuel 16:7. Bringing down rulers from their thrones, he is the King of kings. Kingdoms, nations, and kings and leaders rise and fall through his sovereign grace, and that alone, because his sovereignty extends over the geopolitical leader, and those who are not rulers, those who are on the opposite end of society, the lowly, he will be exalted. And this brings, Luke speaks on this in 14:11, in 18:14, the principle of he who humbles himself shall be exalted, but he who exalts himself shall be abased. And abased can translate as humiliation. They are both, and humble and humiliation are both etymological exponents of the same Latin root word humus that translates as earth or ground. So a humble person will be internally inclined to be down to earth, whereas prideful people, they have to be humiliated, and their prideful actions do precipitate the consequence, which results in them being brought to the ground, because there's only so high one can rise before being brought down appropriately by the one whose justice is better than ours. And now the hungry that he fills, this can be the physically hungry or the spiritually hungry. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. We read it in the Beatitudes, Matthew 5:6. So there is a spiritual hunger. He is the master of both matter and spirit, so as such he is capable of filling all our needs in both realms, in both arenas. And the rich, they go a-begging. So the rich, they rely on their resources, but their worldly or human resources, abilities, achievements, and accomplishments mean nothing to the one they have to answer to. They're going to be sent away empty. This is going to be reversal of much of the world, as the world as we know it. In verses 54 and 55 describes the blessings for Israel. He sustained Israel, his servant, in remembrance of his compassion, of his mercy, as he has spoken to our fathers, to Abraham, and to his seed forever. So her son, her child, was the fulfillment of the Abrahamic promise, because this takes us back to Genesis 12:1-3, where Yahweh tells him that the nation you are going to be a blessing to other nations, but there's also a proto-evangelism that's a reference to the Savior to come, in that, as interpreted by the book Paul in the book of Galatians, he clarifies that through your seed, he says that it was a singular one, so the nation of Israel did not bring about the blessing that Yahshua alone brings and continues to bring. So he sustains Israel, he sustains the church, he has sustained Israel, the world's oldest still operating and functioning civilization. It is never more than a generation away from extinction. Look at it right now. It's surrounded by hostile, adverse, or Arab nations who, to varying degrees, all want to see her extinct, off the map. They're offended by the nation's right to exist, and that hatred is nothing new. There has been anti-Semitism is one of the ugly realities of history, but they are the chosen. They were the chosen people, and they still are the chosen people of Yahweh, because we sort of replace them in the new covenant, the Christians and the church. But the blessings that we enjoy from the in the church and from the church are inherited from Israel, and we must never forget that, and nor remind ourselves that our blessings are connected to the blessings that Abraham's nation and seed were designed to deliver. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.